You ever stop and think about what it actually means to know a word? It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But wow, the journey that word takes, from just seeing it on a page to it actually sticking in your brain, it's honestly one of the most incredible, complex things we do. So let's get into it. Let's unpack the science behind all of this.
All right, so let's just start with what feels like the most basic question you could possibly ask. What even is a word? I mean, come on, we all think we know the answer to that, right? It's a bunch of letters with spaces on either side. But that super simple idea? Yeah, that's about to fall apart. Real fast.
Okay, just look at these examples. Book. Easy. No problem there, classic one-word word. But then, what about freeze-dry? That looks like two words, but it acts like one single verb, right? Or something like, oh no! That's a whole phrase, a whole reaction, but it acts like one single chunk of meaning. And don't even get me started on idioms, things like to bite the dust. All of a sudden, that neat little definition we had for a word, it just completely falls apart.
So if word isn't really the right word for word, then what is? See, to really get a handle on vocabulary, we got to start thinking a little more like linguists do. We need to be way more precise about, the actual building blocks of language.
So linguists basically see two big teams of words. On one side, you've got your content words. These are the stars of the show, right? The nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, they carry all the real meaning. They're the heavy lifters. And then on the other side, you've got function words. These are kind of like the grammatical glue that holds everything together. Think of little words like of, and, or they. Get this, there are only about 300 of them in English, but man, they do all the critical work of connecting those big, meaty ideas. And all this brings us to a much, much better term, the lexical item. This is like the secret weapon that linguists use. And it's so brilliant because it's basically a catch-all term for any piece of language that acts like a single unit of meaning. So it doesn't matter if it's a simple word like book, or a phrasal verb like put up with, or even a whole idiom like kick the bucket. They're all lexical items. All right, so we've nailed down what a lexical item is. That's cool. But now we get to the really juicy part. What does a word actually mean? Because I'm telling you, it is never, ever just what you find in the dictionary. So you got to understand that pretty much every word is doing two jobs at once. First, you've got what's called the denotation. And honestly, that's kind of the boring part. It's the literal dictionary definition. A snake is a scaly, legless reptile. Period. Fact. But then you have the connotation. And that's all the feelings, the ideas, the emotional baggage that comes with the word. And for a word like snake, well, that's a whole lot of evil, danger, and betrayal all wrapped up, right?
And this is where connotation gets so powerful. I mean, look at inexpensive versus cheap. Technically, they mean the same thing. It didn't cost a lot of money. But just feel the difference. If you say you bought an inexpensive shirt, you sound smart, right? Like you got a good deal. But if you say you bought a cheap shirt, oof, it just sounds flimsy, maybe a little tacky.
Or here's another great one. Moist versus soggy. Again, they both just mean it has water in it, but a moist piece of cake sounds delicious. A soggy piece of cake, no thanks. That's just, a disaster. See, the connotation totally changes how we feel about it. It's amazing how many different flavors one single idea can have. I mean, all of these words here mean overweight, but their connotations, they are miles apart. Obese sounds really cold, almost medical. Plump, on the other hand, can sound kind of cute, almost endearing. And stout can suggest strength, being sturdy. This right here is what separates a good writer from a truly great one. They totally get these subtle emotional signals. Okay, we get it. Words are complicated. They're layered, but how do we actually learn them? Like, how does a word go from just being some ink on a page to something that's locked into our memory forever? To figure that out, we got to take a little dive into cognitive science.
Okay, so picture your brain as this super busy mailroom. A new word shows up, that's a new piece of mail. It hits your sensory memory first, but only for like a split second. If your brain thinks, hey, this might be important, it gets passed on to short-term memory. But that's just a temporary inbox, It's not permanent. The real goal, the big prize, is to get that word filed away properly in the huge, massive library that is your long-term memory. And if you don't do something to make that happen, poof, it just gets thrown out, forgotten.
So what does it take to get that word from the inbox into the permanent library? Well, research points to a kind of magic number, and it's somewhere between 5 and 16 meaningful encounters. That's right, just seeing a word once or twice, it's basically useless.
Your brain has to bump into it, use it, and kind of play with it over and over again before it finally decides, okay, this one's important, I'm going to keep it.
So how do you make those 5 to 16 encounters actually count? Well, there's this great little framework called code, and the key thing here is that it's not just about repeating something over and over, it's about the quality of the encounter. So C is for connect. You have to connect the word to something you already know. O is for organize. Group it with other words that are similar. D is for deeply process. Don't just read it, you got to visualize it, say it out loud, really engage with it. And E is for explore. Go out and find it in the wild. Try using it yourself.
All right, so that's the science behind it. Now for the payoff. Let's take all this theory and turn it into some real, practical strategies you can actually start using. And while we're at it, let's bust a few common myths about how we learn words.
Remember in school being told to just look it up in the dictionary and use it in a sentence? We all heard that, right? Well, it turns out that's one of the worst ways to actually learn a word. The research shows that what really works is much more active. Things like being explicitly taught the word, connecting it to your own life and experiences, and, this is my personal favorite, actually breaking the word down into its smaller parts to see how it's built. Let's zoom in on that last one for a second, breaking words down. It's called morphemic analysis, and I'm telling you, it's like a learning superpower. Check this out. Just by knowing what the prefix un means, you get a head start on understanding 26% of all the words in English that have a prefix. But wait, it gets better. If you just learn 4 of the most common prefixes, you suddenly have the key to unlock almost 60% of them. That's just insane. It's incredible leverage for your brain. So what does this all look like in real life? It's actually pretty simple. It's just about being active. So next time you come across a new word, don't just read the definition. Create a weird mental picture for it. Challenge yourself to actually use it in a conversation later that day. Or group it with other words you know that have a similar meaning. And forget those boring vocabulary lists. Start a little word notebook. Write down a sentence, find a synonym for it, maybe even doodle a picture next to it. The whole point is to make learning active, not passive. So, why does any of this matter? Well, it's because words are so much more than just tools for talking to each other. They're the tools we use to think. The more words you know, the more precisely you can think. It lets you have more powerful ideas, and it gives you a much deeper understanding of the world. So my question for you is, what new word are you going to go out and truly know today?